Good evening, everyone, and I guess good afternoon to the California contingent. This is Tim Alexander. I'm the Executive Director of IPHO, and I'm really excited about this webinar series and tonight's presentation. I want to welcome students from really all over the country. Just checking the registrations here, we have well over 100 from 20 different states. So really great to see the enthusiasm among student pharmacists around the country to learn more about pharmacists and their role in industry. I'm going to turn over in a second to Ken Liu and his team of fellows. I just want to take a moment to really thank them for volunteering. This was their idea. We've got a terrific team of presenters tonight who are going to share their experiences and knowledge with all of you students around the country. So with that, thanks again for tuning in tonight. We have another one scheduled for next Tuesday. So if you like what you hear tonight, please come on back and join us next Tuesday. With that, I'm going to turn over now to Ken Liu, a fellow with Genzyme and MCPHS.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alexander. So again, my name is Ken Liu. I'm a first-year fellow in the Medical Affairs / MSL department, specifically focusing on multiple sclerosis with Genzyme, Sanofi Company, and MCPHS University. Thank you so much for that eloquent introduction, and I'm just excited to see so many students on the line, hopefully learning a little bit more about each department. I would also like to mention that there will be 2 additional webinars, one next Tuesday and the one the next Tuesday after that. They will be focusing on clinical development, biomarker development, and clinical supplies. And the other one will focus on regulatory and pharmacovigilance. So joining me today, I have another MCPHS University Fellow, Damian Biawanchik is how you pronounce it. He is a first-year fellow at Becton Dickinson in their Global Medical Affairs Diabetes Care position. I also have Dr. Hannah Kim, who is a managed care resident at Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey. And I have Dr. Jonathan Rosen, who is also a managed care resident at Humana Health Plan in Louisville, Kentucky. So thank you guys for being on the line with me, and look forward to it. Okay, so let's get started. Here's the agenda. So we split it up into the different departments within the whole medical affairs umbrella. So each company will have a different kind of organizational structure, and they'll have different kind of departments within the umbrella. So as we can see, we have medical science liaisons, medical publications, medical managed care and health outcomes liaisons, health economics and outcomes research, MedInfo, and medical or scientific communications. And depending on the company, these may be under different titles as well. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Biawanchik, who's going to start it off.
Okay, thank you, Ken, for the warm introduction. As Ken stated earlier, my name is Dr. Damian Biawanchik. I am a first-year Global Medical Affairs Fellow with Becton Dickinson. I work in diabetes care, and specifically advanced diabetes technologies. I actually work for a medical device company, so if anybody has any questions about my specific perspective or my experience, feel free to ask me towards the end of the presentation. So I'll get us started. As Ken mentioned, medical affairs is really just a term we use to describe all the functional groups listed on the past slide. It's very much just an umbrella term used in the pharmaceutical and medical device industries. It represents the team of scientists and healthcare professionals that make up the medical backbone of the organization. The medical affairs team creates value for the company by providing the medical perspective, essentially, on certain tasks or projects or initiatives relating to the company's drug or device. For the most case, medical affairs works with products that are FDA approved and already on the market. Medical affairs, for that reason, tends to work very closely with the brand or marketing team in many of endeavors. As we move forward in the presentation, and we'll dive into each functional group individually, I'd like you just to keep in mind that the roles we discuss, they often differ from company to company depending on the size of the organization and the life cycle of the product we're working on. So if we can move on.
Absolutely. And Damien, I'll jump in whenever I see any discrepancies between our two companies. And of course, if you could as well during my section of the presentation.
Sure, sounds great. All right, so the first functional group we'll discuss is the medical or scientific communications department. And that name really differs depending what company you're talking about. But the function of this group is really to be the main driver behind the company's medical strategy. Medical communications plays a really huge role in essentially orchestrating the release of scientific data into the scientific community through things like peer-reviewed manuscripts, abstracts, poster presentations. The medical communications group develops the clinical plan that aligns the clinical study timeline with the publication timeline, as well as aligning with key scientific conferences. The coordination of these three factors is really important because it generates interest and creates awareness around a particular drug or disease state or maybe a product that your company is working on. And to give you a personal example from BD, I work in diabetes, and there are a handful of large annual diabetes conferences that take place every year, such as the ADA, which is the American Diabetes Association Clinical Meeting, and the EASD. And the medical affairs team at BD really has a responsibility to make sure that certain clinical trials are complete, statistical analyses performed, and abstracts or posters submitted in time for the presentation at each of these important large-scale scientific meetings. Outside of that external communication, though, the medical communication department is responsible for a lot of the internal communication that goes on in the company. An example being maybe informing certain internal stakeholders or leadership teams of clinical study outcomes. This process would require things like interpreting informally maybe statistical results and then presenting this data to different departments within the organization itself.
Yeah, and Damien, on my side, so as I focus on the therapeutic area of multiple sclerosis, the medicalers at Genzyme, we call it the medical communications team. We do have a publication plan where we prepare for the various neurology conferences, both European and across the U.S. In addition to that, the MedCom team has fingers in the what we'll see as the medical review board, where essentially promotional and medical pieces are reviewed for clinical accuracy. The MedCom team kind of focuses on that give and take with the healthcare provider community across the nation. So.
Exactly, and we'll touch upon the committee right on the next slide.
Yeah. Oh, and I'd also like to mention, if you have a question at any time in this presentation, please hit I think it says submit a question. I can't really tell on my screen here, obviously. But next to the Meeting Burner logo in the top left of your screen, you should be able to submit a question. And at the end, we'll go ahead and read out the most relevant questions and answer them accordingly, okay?
All right, so as Ken was touching upon the Medical Review Committee, that's another one of the main functions of the Medical Communications Department. So the inverted pyramid, or maybe it's a funnel, here demonstrates that process. And so the role of the medical communications team is to participate in what's called the Promotional Review Committee, or the PRC. And the PRC is really a cross-functional approach. It involves medical, legal, regulatory, compliance teams to validating the accuracy of clinical messages that are developed by the brand team, also known as, in some companies, the marketing team. And this is because the range of acceptable clinical messages in dialogue is really limited to FDA-approved language that you'll see in the package insert, the IPhO, or the package labeling. And medical affairs is really there to ensure that the brand team's proposed messages are consistent with the package insert and they're not necessarily overstated. And outside of this obvious, these misstatements or exaggerations, medical affairs team also looks at, more subtle issues, such as, can we say that our product has fewer and less side effects than our competitor without conducting a head-to-head study per se? Or, does the promotional piece present a fair balance of benefits and risks? Or even, does our advertisement contain a misleading image? If so, how can we fix it?
And at Genzyme, we actually split this up into a promotional review board and a medical review board. So the medical review board takes a look at, through the regulatory, legal, compliance, brand team perspective, of medical literature that we disseminate in the field. While the promotional review board looks at purely the commercial pieces that you would say.
Awesome. Okay, so the next functional group here we'll discuss is the medical publications team. And they're responsible for just that, really. They're responsible for the actual creation of communicable materials into the scientific community in the form of abstracts, posters, or published manuscripts. And depending on the type of publication, this team may do a little, most, or all of the writing for the piece. The medical publications department is also responsible for developing an annual publication plan that supports the medical strategy. Once again, timing is everything. External communications must be developed and released in such a way that they really generate the right amount of awareness at the most appropriate time. And usually, this aligns with scientific meetings or prior to a product launch. The medical publications team is also responsible for identifying and engaging with key opinion leaders, or KOLs. Since KOLs are usually leaders in their disease states, they bring a certain amount of influence to the table. For this reason, KOLs are seen as obviously valuable authors, publications, and abstracts. And they're often invited to write and contribute to some of these scientific manuscripts. It's really important, though, to remember that although certain authors may be utilized for their level of influence, each publication really needs to conform to high ethical standards. KOLs can't just be listed in publications because they have a well-known name. And for this reason, the medical affairs team must ensure that publications conform not only to internal policies, but also to the industry-wide guidelines, such as the GPPs or the good publication practices. All right. And so the next diagram here is once again it's relevant to the medical publications department, and it really gives you an idea of what types of information contribute to the creation of the publication plan. So questions that must be asked include, when will data from clinical trials be available? How can we time the release of publications so that they generate the most impact possible? Which publications are ideal? Will the message align with the company's strategy? How can we assist the KOLs that are championing, some of these publications? And really, once you answer all of these questions, you can finally work on putting together the finished product, which in this case is the publication plan.
And so the publication plan should usually define the company's rolling kind of assessment of what needs to be disseminated via conference or via journal as abstract or poster, and et cetera.
Exactly. Great point.
Okay, guys. So thank you, Dr. Białączyk. So I'm going to get into the next couple departments. So medical information. So the medical information department addresses typical concerns about commercial drug products, including safety, efficacy, dosing, and administration. They're reached out to via internet, phone, or email, and healthcare providers or patients can ask these questions. So this is really the department that answers the questions of your everyday key opinion leader or patient. So the medical information experts are often the primary recipients, again, of questions from patients, healthcare providers, and interested parties. They must generally be equipped with fair and balanced pre-written letters that accurately describe the information a company has available or doesn't have about each newly approved agent. So each company will have a database of medical information responses as well, just for many questions that they would anticipate as a company to be receiving. And if it hasn't been addressed via this database, then the MedInfo department would go into the internal documentation and research the question and see if the answer is available or not. And of course, the medical information department is responsible for keeping this database of information up to date. And in addition, the MedInfo department does play an active role in the development of commercial materials and or sales training. So there is a medical education aspect as well, and some companies actually have a separate medical education department. So that's just a really quick picture of all the questions, side effects, administration questions that the MedInfo department could possibly receive. And so the next section is the field medical team, or the medical science liaison function. And this is personally the focus of my particular fellowship, as my preceptors are both MSL directors. But the role of the MSL is to cultivate, maintain, and leverage scientific relationships with national, regional, and local key opinion leaders. So this MSL team is out in the field. They're responsible for a territory, and they provide avenues of scientific exchange within their particular territory. So an MSL contributes to the development and implementation of medical education strategies and initiatives, such as advisory board meetings, speaker training initiatives, roundtables, and they also deliver medical presentations to diverse audiences effectively, including physicians, pharmacists, nurses, managed care organizations, etc. I should also note that in addition to an MSL presenting, they train speakers or key opinion leaders on presentations as well. And again, to maintain clinical and scientific expertise via continued medical education, including attendance to medical symposia, congresses, and conventions. This is personally my favorite part of the job. So basically, keeping up to date with the newest, most cutting edge information in the field. So the MSL team is responsible for really knowing the science behind not just their products, but the disease state and therapeutic landscape in general. Because they are field-based, there is a certain travel commitment required.
I just wanted to touch upon really quick, Ken, the travel, maybe give you an example from BD. So BD is really a mid-sized company. We only have 3 MSLs, though, and so the U.S. is split up into 3 different regions. And from what I've spoken to the MSLs about, they find that travel could be exhaustive when you're looking at such a large region. And I've been with BD for about 4 months now, and I've only seen one of the MSLs once because he's always on the road. He travels maybe 90 or 95% of the time. So if travel is really not something you're interested in, it's usually a killer for some people. It's just something.
I would definitely agree, Damien. So I can speak briefly about our team. We have 32 MSLs on our multiple sclerosis team, split up into south, north, east, west. Obviously, 32 versus 3. There is a certain amount of less travel involved, but certainly visits back to the home office, conferences and things, there can certainly be a good amount of travel there. And I would say that I've already, in these 4 months as I've started my fellowship, I've already seen that, and I've already been out in the field multiple times. So it really depends. So the medical science liaison, so just some brief, this diagram here kind of highlights some of the responsibilities, including providing patient education materials that MedCom or Med Publications and MedInfo has created for these healthcare providers in the field, assisting with study sponsorships or via grants, assisting even with clinical trial enrollment. We are, for example, my team is helping with one of our phase 2 trials, enrolling sites and ensuring that everything is aligned. Again, speaker programs and roundtables, and creating avenues in general of knowledge exchange. So it's not just about pushing your own product, but it's also about providing information about the disease state and therapeutic landscape as well. And that is what separates an MSL from a commercial sales rep. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jonathan Rosen, who's going to talk about medical managed care and managed care health outcomes liaisons.
Actually, it's Dr. Hannah again, but thank you.
Oh, sorry, Hannah. Go ahead.
It's okay. So as Dr. Liu mentioned, I'm a first-year pharmacy management resident at Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey in the pharmacy management side of the business. And I'll briefly touch upon the medical managed care and managed care health outcomes liaisons role. But before I do, I just want to provide you guys with a little background. So as you guys are all aware, the current healthcare landscape has been shifting, especially because the cost of medicine and our healthcare has been growing exponentially, and there's no way for us to cap that cost. And because there is no way for us to cap that cost, the reason why health outcomes and managed care, medical managed care has become such an area that has been growing is because the focus has been going from more of a volume-based to a value-based. So for the medical managed care and managed care health outcomes liaisons, one of their primary focus is to build scientific relationships with managed care organizations and other payer influencers such as Horizon Blue Cross, Humana, Aetna, United, and etc. I think out of the 4 blocks here, the most important block is the purple one, which is their most important role is to ensure a clear understanding of the balanced scientific, clinical, and pharmacoeconomic data related to company products. So as you guys are all aware, there have been a lot of medications that have been approved by the FDA, especially for specialty pharmacy. And for all of these pharma companies to be able to place their products in a formulary or to create more market access to their products, they have to be able to provide the managed care organizations or their payers and prove to them what kind of a value their product has. One important role they have also is to understand what information the payers or the MCOs want to look at, because most of the clinical trials that are conducted for approval, they're all against placebo. But from a more realistic position, MCOs and payers, they're not really interested in looking at products that are only compared to placebo products. They want to look at active comparators, or they want to look at your product being compared to the standards of care, because for the MCOs and the payers, their perspective is for us to put some clinical value in your product, we need to understand how beneficial it is. Does it allow does it lessen mortality? Does it increase the person's life expectancy, etc.? So those are all the important things that are looked at. The health outcomes liaisons and the medical managed care liaisons also have to look at the current standard of care, and they also have to understand the clinical trends and the practices that they see in each region. The field medical team that usually visits the MCOs or the payers is made up of account managers, the MSL that Dr. Liu touched upon, who are technically the clinical face of the team, as well as now health outcome liaisons are now becoming part of that team, and they're all responsible for a specific region or a specific payer. The next part is they're responsible in supporting and moderating advisory board meetings and speaker training initiatives similar to an MSL. And also similar to MSL, it requires a lot of training. So like Dr. Damien mentioned, if traveling is something that you're not very keen on, this role most likely would not suit your need. One last thing also is because nowadays the MCOs and the payers have a lot of influence in regards to the market access to a specific product, there is continual open dialogue between the liaisons as well as MCOs and the payers in regards to the liaisons trying to understand what type of information that the payers want. They're always asking, what type of information do you want? What type of studies would be most relevant or applicable to this product or for this specific indication? And by having that open dialogue, the health outcome liaisons and the medical managed care liaisons are able to go back to the company and kind of voice what type of questions have arisen during their visits to the different MCOs and payers. And internally, they'll be able to come up with a different strategy or perhaps work with a third party in regards to creating more clinical trials to provide the information that's required.
And as I understand it, Hannah, so they're looking primarily, the payers rather, what they're looking for can be very different than a healthcare provider. So perhaps the payer is not as interested in the deep science of mechanism of action per se, but what they want to see is cost effectiveness, reductions in hospitalizations and data like that. Is that right?
Correct. So scientific information is important because it is to the clinicians that you're presenting to, and it's the clinicians from the MCOs and the payer market that are sitting in on these meetings. But what it comes down to is we have to make a decision as to what the value of your medication is compared to other medications. So, for example, Sovaldi, when Sovaldi came out, there was a lot of hype about it because the cure rate for it was in the 90s. But then just recently, Harvoni came out, and its cure rates are in the higher 90s. So when Harvoni is positioning their product, they have to be able to come to the managed care organizations and the payers, and that they have to be able to speak to their clinical trials as well as try to position their product and show us what type of benefit we'll see. Is this product going to be used in the majority of our patient population that the specific MCO covers? Does there have to be a clinical practice change according to the guidelines where this product may fall favorably under? So those are all the things that are taken into consideration, and those are all the information that the health outcomes liaisons as well as the MSLs are able to and should be able to provide when asked.
Thank you. Okay.
The health economics and outcomes research, otherwise called HEOR, they're mostly responsible for the creation of mathematical models to synthesize data from biostatistics and epidemiology for support of medical decision making for international markets as well as U.S. MCOs. Their primary responsibility is to create budget impact models and cost calculators to do a cost-benefit analysis of their product, in addition to creating a global value.ca and doing data analytics. The budget impact model is something that can be usually found in a dossier, and a dossier is a large PDF document that's created by pharma that includes all the clinical information, their clinical trials, as well as their budget impact model that's distributed to the different MCOs and the payer markets for them to evaluate and to review prior to the MSLs and the liaisons coming on site to present their products. The health economics and outcomes research is also responsible in regards to influence evidence development and pricing strategy for new products that come out, and they also drive product adoption based on clinical and economic value, and they also establish new metrics for value assessment by external stakeholders. The second bullet, the drive product adoption based on clinical and economic value. I briefly touched upon it in the previous slide, but for them also what they're looking at is where does their product fall based on the current standard of practice or the prescribing habits of the physicians or the KOLs. So those are all the different things and they have to take into consideration. In regards to the global value dossier, that's an internal use only evidence-based document created by each pharma, and it basically tells a compelling value story of a product and demonstrates clinical and economic effectiveness. It can also help and aid in developing product evidence strategy, provide a basis for the outcomes research plans, align with the other team members on the product value messaging, as well as help local operating units gain market access and meet evidence requirements in their respective countries. And now I'll pass it on to Dr. Rosen.
Thank you very much, Hannah. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jonathan Rosen. I'm currently a resident at Humana, which is a health plan based out of Louisville, Kentucky, that covers mostly a Medicare population. And I spend most of my time on the clinical strategies team doing exactly what Dr. Kim just described, evaluating the value of products and sort of seeing, where they fall into therapy and what the best way of covering those medications is. So when you look at really two major hurdles for an industry to come out to essentially jump over, you have two real goals here. And one is product approval, which we really see internal, which is what you're exposed to in school, right? Which is your phase 1, 2, 3 clinical trials. Let's get the product on the market. Let's get it approved by the FDA. And there you evaluate the product for safety, efficacy, and quality in a controlled population. And you have obviously R&D playing into that, med affairs, which Ken spoke to before, and a huge regulatory component in the FDA, making sure that you're compliant with all the FDA standards and regulations that will get your product to the market. More where we're seeing the market shift now is into this product adoption space. So great, you have your product approved by the FDA, but how are you going to ensure that prescribers are prescribing it, and how are you going to ensure that payers are paying for it? So you have an idea of where your product wants to be. You have a niche market that you want to target. How do you really get it there? And that's where you start looking at things like real-world outcomes data in your phase 4 studies, and you start looking at cost-effectiveness models, budget impact models, and overall the affordability of the product. And this is where your HEOR team comes into play, as Dr. Kim alluded to before. But they're really going to be the ones looking at, overall the disease state. What sort of outcomes are you looking for in this disease state? And now compare that to other products, and do other products, for example, reduce hospitalizations or reduce mortality in a certain disease state? And if you can show those sorts of things, and if you can explain that to a payer, then that's something that at least I on the payer side am very interested in, because I know in the long run treating a patient with your drug will save their life or will prevent them from going into the hospital, which is obviously something that we're all interested in. Take that product adoption and put a spin on it and put it on the KOL side, and on the medical side. Are you trying to get uptake on your drug on the prescriber side with physicians actually prescribing your drug? And then if you show them, your patients will be in the hospital less and they'll actually be able to afford the medication, well, that's an incentive for your prescriber to actually start prescribing the drug. And so that's really where you see product adoption. It branches out into both the prescriber side and into the managed care/payer side. So if you could advance to the next slide, please. We really see this is sort of a timeline. It's a vertical inverted timeline is the way I like to think about it, in that you start in a pipeline. You start with a value proposition. You have an idea of a product and what sort of population you want to target. And that's your value proposition on the bottom. I want to target this population in this disease state because there's an unmet medical need there. And that's really sort of where industry and thought begins. Where is there an unmet medical need? And from there we go to the market landscape assessment. Okay, so what sort of treatment options are available for that disease state already? And then that's when we start developing a clinical program for a product, and we go through our trial process. We get the product approved. We look at its efficacy, safety, quality, and then we start thinking about health economics, really, and we start gathering data there as well. And once we have all that data, we look and we say, okay, we have a product. We have all this data. What does it really mean? What does it mean for the population? What does it mean for essentially the medical world? And then once you have that story and you have it all kind of told in that global value dossier that Hannah was speaking to earlier, you get that message out, and you get it out to payers, and you get it out to KOLs, or key opinion leaders who are going to influence the prescribing physicians in that disease state. And ultimately what you're doing there is supporting that value proposition that you had in the first place. So you have an idea of what value you want to bring to the market, and then you do all of the steps in between to ultimately support that value proposition. And what's also really interesting about this diagram is that it gets narrower as you go. So you start with a sort of broader idea, kind of a cloudy image of what you want to do, and then by the time you get to the top, you have a specific product with specific data targeting a specific population in a specific disease state. And that's sort of where the industry is going now. And it's just a very interesting way to think about it. But we see really the industry is going from, as Hannah said before, quantity to quality, and we're really starting to look at value now more than ever before.
Absolutely, Dr. Rosen. I would say that the value proposition also, from what I have seen at our companies, is that it begins very early. It begins even in the preclinical stage occasionally. So we actually do have a fellowship here on the MCPHS University, specifically in health economics and outcomes research with Becton Dickinson, which I think Damien would be able to go into a little more detail about in a bit. But
okay. Yeah, I mean, the overall message here supports what our fellow does, but if anyone has any specific questions pertaining to that fellowship itself, then feel free.
Right.
I can address those.
All right. Well, I'd
Okay.
like to turn it over to you, Ken. Yeah.
Thank you. So at this point, we would just like to talk a little bit about our program at MCPHS University. So again, as the focus of this presentation is on medical affairs, managed care, and medical and value-based outcomes. So the fellowships, we offer a number of fellowships in these departments. So the first being Biogen IDEX Medical and Value-Based Outcomes Fellowship. So they establish and foster ongoing professional relationships with key managed market decision and policymakers. This particular fellowship has rotations within numerous areas within both managed care and medical affairs, including global market access, health and economics outcomes research, value-based medicine, global medical affairs in general, and government policy and advocacy. Biogen IDEC also has a global medical fellowship, which rotates within the traditional medical affairs departments, including communications, information, training, medical writing, medical publications, research, the aforementioned medical and value-based outcomes department, and insights and analytics. And they also have elective rotations within the commercial side, including marketing, safety and benefit risk management, regulatory and global market access. So Genzyme, or Sanofi Oncology, has a fellowship as well in global medical affairs with core rotations in the publications, education, communications departments, as well as strategic planning. And they offer elective rotations, again, in the commercial side. So commercial and marketing, they offer an elective rotation in health economics and outcomes research, the medical science liaison role, and competitive intelligence. Genzyme offers a fellowship in global medical affairs and rare diseases with similar core rotations, including communications and publications, education, medical science liaison, and an optional rotation in clinical development. In addition, you can also rotate, again, in the HEOR, or Health Economics and Outcomes Research Department, the Commercial Market Access, and Patient Advocacy as well. Becton Dickinson offers a Health Economics and Outcomes Research Fellowship, which I was alluding to earlier, where they're focused on specifically the Health Economics and Outcomes Department. So essentially, this fellow is conducting regional and business level HEOR assessments to drive meaningful data generation and establishing collaborations with healthcare providers as they search for the endpoints that payers and healthcare providers are looking for. And so with that, I'm going to go to the question box and start reading off some of the questions I've been receiving over the course of this presentation. The first one being from Joshua. So Joshua asked, how much weight does being a part of publications hold in targeted fellowships? So I can say that almost most medical affairs fellowships offer a rotation within the publications department. A publications department, again, is very vital in the dissemination of information, whether it be via conference, journal, in manuscript or poster format, and they're central to the creation of the publication plan. A fellow would be heavily involved in probably the process from beginning to end of those things. I know that at Genzyme, my particular fellowship, my rotation in publications will consist of me working on the creation, inception, and abstract of a poster to be submitted to a neurology conference from beginning to end. Damien, do you have anything to say about the publications department at Becton Dickinson?
Yeah, I could comment to that. So the Medical Affairs Department at BD, I guess it's not like your typical Medical Affairs Department. It's a bit smaller, so we take a more multifaceted approach. We don't have a formal medical publications department, but from my experiences, I do have some involvement with publications, also with clinical trials. So I had the opportunity to be a synopsis author on a few of our studies, which later, when we publish the results, I will be involved with the creation of the publication itself, pertaining to those specific studies. So I'll have the opportunity to publish and to contribute to the scientific papers.
Okay, the next question comes from Micheline, who asks, if a fellowship says clinical development / medical strategy, is that medical affairs? So this particular fellowship you would be looking at would be what looks like a cross-functional fellowship. So perhaps a 2-year program where their first year would be in clinical development, which is not part of medical affairs. And medical strategy would probably be the second year, which would be very integral in the medical affairs department, probably similar to a communications role, as I was mentioning earlier. So Mensong asked the question. Hey, Mensong. Hi, Ken. I have a question regarding the MSL fellowship. Do you start off right away working in the field with your preceptor, or do you have to go through a lot of training in-house first? Thanks. So for my particular fellowship, they kind of throw me in real early. So probably a couple weeks in, while doing my therapeutic training, I had the opportunity to sit on an advisory board where we gather a number of key opinion leaders in one particular region to ask them about their opinion of our products, what data we're missing and what data they would like to see, what data we already have, and how do they feel about these particular endpoints that we may have. So that was a great opportunity. I also have attended several roundtables throughout the past couple months as well, but they do throw me in. And again, this would depend on the particular fellowship. So Damien, are you going to have the opportunity to rotate with the MSLs at Becton Dickinson?
Yes, I interact with one of our MSLs, Tom. He's the director of the group there. He provides the fellows with an opportunity, the medical affairs fellows specifically, with going on a few trips with him, and he provides you with the opportunity to discuss certain topics with healthcare professionals. And he really just throws you out in the field. He'll give you a brief intro, and you can see if you like it, and if you don't, either you don't really have to continue with the field-based work, and you could just stay in-house. So we're pretty flexible here.
Very cool. The next question comes from Melissa. Melissa asks, for MSLs that travel mostly within the U.S., are foreign doctors encompassed in studies and consulted? So the MSL role, while being global, the focus of any fellowship really, whether it be a rotation within the MSLs or focused on the MSLs, would be within the U.S. because the doctors within the U.S. Are looking for different things in terms of insurance, outcomes, things like that, than they are globally. However, the other departments of medical affairs are generally global departments. So I should mention that. Any input, Damon?
Yeah, my medical affairs position is a global position.
Right.
You're right in terms of pertaining to MSLs, that's only domestic. As an MSL, you have the opportunity to attend international conferences and symposia, but the extent of my international work revolves around clinical evaluation reports and CE markings, which is specific to the EU, not to the U.S.
And again, the MSL role, while it may be called differently, does exist outside of the U.S. However, I'm pretty sure most fellowships do not offer that opportunity to be focused on. Anne asks, is HEOR considered a commercial department? So this depends on the company. I know that, I think I read something recently that around 30% of HEOR departments are encompassed within the medical affairs organization. And the rest are outside of that department. I would not place it within commercial per se, but often it can be found within the medical department. Joshua asks, does the scope of the fellowship for health outcomes research focus on a particular set number of steps or from start to finish? So I really can't speak to the HEOR department fellowship that Becton Dickinson offers.
I can't.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say, I really can't answer that question either. I'm just not sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can certainly reach out to the current fellow and find out for you, Joshua. We do have access. So I can say they're heavily involved in budget calculators, budget impact analyses, the creation of these analyses, and contracting out to vendors to provide these analyses. So identifying which ones are necessary and then contracting out to different companies for those analyses. Nancy Simon asks, at midyear, do fellowship directors look at poster presentations, and is there something specific they look for, or can student research be on any topic? So from my personal experience thus far, any type of poster presentation or research or ability to demonstrate that you have that ability is looked highly upon. I mean, again, it depends on the preceptor, how they feel. What are they looking for in their fellowship? Or their fellow rather, are they looking for clinical ability? Are they looking for research ability, such as a poster? Are they looking for social skills, soft skills, and communication ability? It really does depend. So I really can't say for sure.
Yeah.
Damien, any input?
I would just note that I guess the more unique the topic, the more interesting I would find it, and the more that would stick out to me personally.
Absolutely. Yeah, something that would perhaps separate yourself from other similar student posters would probably be ideal.
Definitely.
Saba asks, are there any student part-time internships in managed care organizations like Humana? I'm sure there are. I don't know if Hannah or John are still on the line if you want to comment on that.
For Horizon, there is a summer internship provided to pharmacy students, and you can either apply directly, or if you're part of the Inroads program, you can also apply through there as well.
I can also add to that. I know AMCP, or the Academy of Managed Care Pharmacy, does offer several internships in the managed care field. They offer one, I know, in conjunction with Allergan, and I think they also offer one with Pfizer.
Yeah,
but you can definitely get the information on their website. But those internships definitely do exist, and they are worth pursuing.
Jim,
and you'll get exposed to a lot during those, too.
Jim Alexander jumping in. Just so everyone is aware, probably 2 months away, IPHO is from launching a pretty robust internship database and application system. That'll carry both industry-focused internships as well as anything else that's related, and managed care is so closely related with industry. So we'll be inviting anyone who wants to post on that board, to do so. So stay tuned. Those of you who have a couple of years left, stay tuned a couple months, and you'll see something new from IPHO.
Thanks, Jim. That sounds like a great opportunity for students that are not in their final year applying for fellowships or other opportunities. So the next question comes from Michelin again. Are MCPHS fellowships only offered in Massachusetts? So several of them are outside of Massachusetts. The Becton Dickinson HEOR fellowship, I believe, is in Franklin Lakes, New Jersey. We have several Pfizer fellowships in Groton, Connecticut. Anything else, Damien? Am I missing something?
We actually have a fellowship based out of Dallas, Texas as well.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
It's a new fellowship. I think the main focus of the fellowship is really combining information technology with the healthcare practice.
Right. That is a brand new fellowship. Absolutely. Brian asks, how do you see the job market for these roles for pharmacists changing in the next few years? I think my personal opinion is that that pharmacists are so valuable in the industry much of these teams are comprised of pharmacists. And I think part of the reason why we're doing this particular webinar is to spread awareness about the amazing opportunities within the pharmaceutical industry for our discipline. So.
Yeah, and I mean, I think sorry.
No, it's okay. And I was just going to say, especially with health economics and outcomes research, that used to be a niche, but like I mentioned earlier, that's a niche that's slowly growing because pharma does see value in the Care-HEOR liaisons because, like I mentioned, we need to be able to understand the value of certain products, and the health economics outcomes research as well as the managed care liaisons are the ones that are able to provide those information. And for me, I see that area just growing. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to say, even you know, the emergence of the PharmD fellowship in a medical device company, you know, the medical device company is often overshadowed by the pharmaceutical industry, but it's a huge market, huge. It's over $100 billion industry, and over just the past 5 years, I think we've seen with Becton Dickinson itself, you know, it went from having only one pharmacist working in-house outside of the MSLs to now I work closely with 8 or 9 pharmacists. So that itself is just an emerging industry for pharmacists.
Okay, moving along. So we have 5 minutes to cover hopefully a bunch of questions if we can fit these in. Elliot, hey Elliot, Elliot asks, I'm very interested in many of the positions described in managed Care-HEOR, yet I haven't had many similar experiences during my API rotations. Is there a steep learning curve for these fellows that have not done rotations in these specific areas? So I can speak to this in saying that the current HEOR fellow, speaking with him, and just in general, you don't get this type of experience specifically within that department within pharmacy school. It's very difficult, and that's kind of the point of the fellowship, is to kind of get your foot in the door and learn about the position. The goal is not to come into the fellowship already aware of what health economics and outcomes research is. So again, what you're describing here is very similar, I would think, to untold students across the country.
Right.
So the next question, I guess this is a pretty good one. So Brian asks, what about your fellowship made you choose yours over the others that you were considering? So really quick, I was very interested in the MSL role, and there are very few MSL positions across the nation, and that's why I applied to these particular ones. And John and Hannah, please feel free to jump in.
Yeah, for me, I actually was looking at HEOR fellowships as well as managed care residencies, and I actually did have an opportunity to do a HEOR fellowship, but I chose managed care because I thought, for me, managed care is a nice middle ground. It's a nice hybrid of both the clinical as well as the business aspect of everything, and especially with the new drugs coming out, especially specialty pharmacy being such a huge area that's growing and becoming a big concern for both industry as well as the payers, I felt like managed care was a better suited area for me to kind of immerse myself in the clinical role as well as understanding the business side and the reimbursements and the different payer models.
I'll end for myself, Ken. I think I was really attracted to the flexibility that's offered by Becton Dickinson. I'm able to really have a multifaceted experience in medical affairs, and then I have the flexibility to also, if I choose, to work very closely with some of the business departments. And I work very closely with the business development team, and I think that that experience is very unique about Becton Dickinson itself. So.
Okay, moving along to the next question. Let's see. How do you suggest students find API rotation opportunities within these companies, both managed care and industry? Are there any central resources that help students find that information? So I know there are opportunities if you're not within a region where they would offer an industry rotation or a managed care rotation. You should be able to reach out to different other areas of the country and set up a rotation perhaps. Internships over the summer also greatly assisted there. So,
and also just getting involved, especially for the younger students getting involved, especially for managed care, AMCP, which is the Academy of Managed Care Pharmacy, as well as IPhO. Those are two organizations that you can join, or DIA, and kind of teach yourself and learn some more network. I think networking is key also. So you may not have the opportunity to do an internship because internship is not an opportunity that everyone is able to get. But if you're able to talk with past fellows or past interns and kind of learn more about their role and their experience, that will paint a better picture for yourself as well.
Okay. And really quick, can you describe the term translational medicine as Michelin? So translational medicine is part of the clinical development webinar, which will be coming up shortly, I believe, either next Tuesday or the Tuesday after that. How significant is the difference in scope of practice between Med Affairs versus global, so U.S. versus global? Again, U.S. participates in European congresses and things like that. However, the global role focuses on key opinion leaders, not just within the United States, but also globally. But they do similar functions. Damien, do you have anything to add to that?
No, you hit that pretty well.
Okay. And I really think that just about covers what time we have. So thank you, everyone, for calling in. I hope you've learned a lot about these departments that we've brought up here today. I will try to address these questions. I will reach out to you regarding these questions. Jim, did you have anything to add?
Just in closing, great job, students. Some really terrific questions. And again, really grateful to our talented presenters for sharing their time with us tonight, volunteering, and for their advice and their experiences. I think I noticed, we even have some students graduating in 2020 tonight. So some of this is some pretty new language, acronyms that can be thrown at you pretty fast. So you want to dive in a little bit more. There are some good resources out there, and I'll direct you to the industrypharmacist.org website resources tab. So www.industrypharmacist.org/resources.php. Here you'll find, and I know they're referencing, the fellows are referencing some of the fellowships that are available out there. If you go into the fellowship information tab, you'll see almost all, and there's 260 fellows in the U.S., you'll see almost all of the brochures listed there. These are changing every day now because the cycle for the next year is turning over. But you can, these are rich sources of information, and you can see what fellows do, and often there's really good descriptions of what that department does, what the function does. So really encourage you to go there. I think, too, there's probably some questions. Again, move pretty fast there, from the treetops, and there's a lot of detail that you can learn about this stuff. If we went fast and you're new to the area, we're recording this tonight, so you'll be able to see it on our YouTube channel, on our website. We'll find a place in this resources section that I just described to post tonight's webinar, as well as the couple to follow. So thanks again to everybody for attending tonight and participating. Stay tuned for information about next week's webinar, which again, some terrific topics. We'll have some different presenters, and look forward to everybody's participation next week. Thanks so much, and good night. Bye-bye.